In a cozy underground burrow, there lived a curious and adventurous young worm. Unlike other worms, this one kept a diary, recording all the exciting and sometimes mundane events of his daily life. He wrote about his family, friends, and the fascinating world above and below the soil. One day, the worm wrote about his first day of school. He was nervous, but excited to meet new friends and learn about the job worms do for the earth. His teacher, Mrs. D, taught them about digging tunnels and helping plants grow. The worm felt proud to be part of such an important ecosystem. The worm's best friend was a spider named Spider. They often played together, though sometimes their differences made things tricky. The worm wrote about how Spider could do amazing things like walk on walls and spin webs, but he couldn't do simple things like dig holes or eat dirt. In his diary, the worm described his family. He had lots of brothers and sisters, and they all looked alike. Sometimes this caused confusion, like when he accidentally ate dinner with the wrong family. He wrote about how embarrassing it was when he realized his mistake halfway through the meal. The worm often wrote about the dangers of being a worm. He described close calls with birds and how scary it was when it rained too much and flooded their tunnels. He also wrote about the time he got lost on the sidewalk, and how a kind human helped him back to the grass. One entry in the diary was all about the worm's hobbies. He loved to practice standing on his head and seeing how long he could hold the position. He also enjoyed playing hide and seek with his friends, though he admitted it wasn't very challenging since they all lived underground. The worm wrote about his dreams and aspirations. He wanted to be the longest worm in the world and hoped to one day visit a far-off place called daycare. He didn't know what it was, but he had heard the human children talking about it and it sounded exciting. In one entry, the worm described a scary encounter with a lawn mower. He wrote about how the ground shook and the loud noise terrified all the worms. They had to dig deeper to stay safe, but afterwards, they enjoyed the freshly cut grass that fell into their tunnels. The worm often pondered the mysteries of life in his diary. He wondered why humans didn't eat dirt when it was so delicious, and why they spent so much time trying to get rid of worms when worms were so helpful to the earth. He hoped one day humans would understand how important worms are. One day, the worm wrote about a field trip to the surface. He and his classmates learned about the world above ground and saw many strange things like flowers, trees, and bicycles. The worm was fascinated by everything he saw, but was glad to return to the safety of his underground home. The worm's diary included funny anecdotes, like the time he tried to use a discarded chewing gum as a sleeping bag. He wrote about how sticky and uncomfortable it was, and how he learned that not everything humans throw away is useful for worms. In one entry, the worm described his birthday party. All his friends came, and they played games like pin the tail on the human and ate delicious mud cakes. He wrote about how happy he was to celebrate with his family and friends, even though worms don't really know their exact birthdays. The worm often wrote about the changing seasons. He described how the earth felt different in summer and winter, and how the worms had to dig deeper when it got cold. He loved spring the most, when new plants started growing and there was lots of fresh soil to explore. One of the worm's favorite diary entries was about the day he learned to read. He was so excited to finally understand the strange markings humans left on paper. He dreamed of one day writing a book that both worms and humans could read and enjoy. As the diary progressed, the worm wrote about growing up and taking on more responsibilities. He helped younger worms learn to dig and taught them about the importance of their role in the ecosystem. He felt proud to pass on his knowledge and experiences to the next generation of worms. In the final entry of his diary, the worm reflected on all he had learned and experienced. He wrote about how every creature, no matter how small, has an important part to play in the world. He hoped that one day, his diary would help others understand and appreciate the life of a worm.